Okay. So it's 12:01 on Wednesday, June 10th. Hi, my name is Victoria Baltz. I'm the resource coordinator at the INCubator at the Hamilton County Business Development Center. This is Experience Talks. So this is a once a month opportunity that we bring experts into the community, into the entrepreneurial community to connect everyone. So today we have the Sasha Group that will be talking about building strong brands that can flex with the times. And I'll leave it up to y'all to introduce yourselves.
Awesome. Cool, I'll start. I'm Brian Moore. I'm a senior account executive here at the Sasha Group. And I'll even kind of, actually, no, I'll pass on the next person. Go. I'll say that for a second.
I'm Stephen Bedford. I'm an account executive here at the Sasha Group.
Oh, okay. Kate Roberts. I'm a copywriter at the Sasha Group.
Jess Riewitz, Associate Creative Director at the Sasha Group.
And I guess it's like, since there's currently only one person in here, if you feel free to jump in, ask any questions at any time. It's like we love for these to be like collaborative kind of like discussions. It's like we do have something kind of set up for some pauses and some Q&A. But if you've got any thoughts, questions, or anything in between, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and since there's only one of you, would you like to introduce yourself too? This is turning into like a one-on-one where you have like an hour and a half of our time. So please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, totally. My name is Antigone. I actually work with the Chattanooga Chamber on their PR and communications efforts. So I'm part of DCI, their agency. So I'm just here to tune in and see what you guys have to say. I'm excited.
Very cool. Thanks for joining us.
Love it. Cool stuff. Alrighty. There it goes.
Yeah. So it's kind of ironic that there's only one person who joined this today, because we're here to talk about some pretty important stuff, or at least things that we perceive as important and that we see the world as perceiving as important right now. We know that everything that's happening in the world is pretty anxiety-inducing and difficult, but I think it's safe to say that small businesses, businesses in general, but particularly small businesses, are being hit twofold right now. Not only do they have to go through all of these big worldwide changes as humans, as people who are experiencing their own emotions on a personal scale, but they're under constant public scrutiny as business owners. So what we want to do is talk a little bit about how consumers on a broader national and global scale have reacted during these world-changing events, and specifically adding on a layer of timeliness by looking at this through the lens of COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement. So that is what we have today.
Yeah, and then I'll also just kind of like chime in a little bit on this of, it's been like really interesting. It's like working with tons of like small businesses kind of like across the Southeast and the US these past few months, because so many of them are coming to us and they're just kind of like almost in this like state of like paralysis from being like unsure of what to do. But it's like these like examples that we've like pulled in, it's like we were able to pull all these great examples even just from Chattanooga, and it was just people like responding and reacting and like doing like what felt right. And like from our opinion, like it is like what's right to do. And it's like, it's not some rocket science kind of thing. And we're it was like really awesome that we didn't, it's like we easily could have pulled in full examples of all of our clients, but it's even awesome just to see that there's so much kind of like knowledge and everything from like the community, even just here in Chattanooga, like what they've been doing to respond and react. So for this first part, we're going to kind of talk about like COVID-19 and when we're like really like looking at COVID-19 and like what's been going on, there's been tons of different frameworks popping up throughout like the marketing communities. And this is kind of like one that like we were using a bunch internally. And it just really kind of like helps you guide you through this kind of like new normal, as we've all been hearing way too much the past few months, and these different kind of phases that people are going through and businesses are going through, and how we can accommodate people like during these times. And then of course, because it's marketing people that made it, they made this like this sweet little bell curve, kind of like the curve of the illness, of COVID. I'm sure every single one I saw was like that. I'm sure that was some marketing people just being marketing people. But to get into the details of them, kind of like that phase one of this like new normal that we're seeing is like, it's just like adjustment phase. And it's really kind of like taking like a look at your brand and to be thinking about, it's like what your brand should be doing as people like are preparing and adjusting for like the reality of staying at home. And so then kind of just like some like quick ideas off that is that it's like, what are like the like needs that you now need to be thinking about for people? And some like low hanging fruit, or just like now that people are like working at home all the time, it's like maybe they need like some quiet time to escape from like their spouse or their kids, or maybe they're kind of like getting into this spot of they're worried about what they're going to do for cooking for the family and everything because they've typically been eating out a bunch. And there's just like, lots of different things there, but just kind of like to touch on at a high level. But then going into like this phase two of this peak, it's then kind of like transitioning to like, how does your brand's role in their life, change? It's like while they're like restricted at home, like how should like your communications, it's like reflect to change that. So it's like if you're like a business and your point of like differentiation was showing off like your super crowded patios on a Sunday afternoon for brunch, well, that's not going to work anymore because you're not going to have a crowded patio anymore because people can't come into your restaurant. Or maybe you're a local venue and you get to have like live concerts and people are coming in and meeting with their friends. Well, again, that's not an option. So how can you like, introduce new things to people during this time, like when their like life is changing and they can't do the things they typically can or like / want to do. And then moving into like the phase three of this like recover, it's then kind of like just taking a look of like what you've done in phase 1 and 2 and thinking about like what is that new relationship, it's like between like your product and service with the customer, and then also it's like how does that potentially change going forward. It's taking that like second look and kind of zooming out a little bit of, is this a thing that we're just going to do right now because it's like we're coming out of this phase 1 and phase 2, or is this something that like you kind of like, or maybe it's like you've seen it, wow, it's like we had such a positive response from our community, maybe we should like, keep some of these things in going forward. And then, it's kind of like, cool. It's like, but it's like, what are we doing? So we kind of just like pulled out some like high level things that are going to come across all three of these sections or all three of these phases. But it's like the first one, it's like make empathy your superpower. Just knowing that like, people are in this like uncertain times and they're like not sure it's like what they need or where they're going to get it. Any way that you can kind of just like, share that kind of like love and caring and like kind of like sense of nurturing, like people are really going to like that. Then kind of like number 2, it's like sacrifice what isn't working and like an embrace like nimble creativity. So it's like just because you can't do the typical things, are there new things that you can do that are maybe like, it's like lighter lifts, or how are you adjusting since maybe you can't have like a photo shoot, or you can't go out and take photos on your patio. And then 3, it's like thinking local. It's like just thinking about how like it's like we're all trying to come together during these times. It's like a good thing to be thinking about like where can you have like the most impact, and that's typically just going to be like in your neighborhoods and how you can contribute and help the people in your like kind of like immediate like vicinity of your city. Then number 4, just like being available and like over communicating. It's like everybody is like looking for information, whether it's like your customers or your employees, in any kind of way that you can create like a safe space for feedback and sharing information. I mean, like in discussing those tough things that people are worrying about, will go like a long way with everybody. Or that's like internally with your teams on just communicating like how the business is going, or even like externally with customers. I mean, it's like, I know from us as just like as a business, it's like we've always been very transparent with like leadership and us kind of like down in the trenches. But as all this started, we started communicating even more on like how we were doing, how everyone was doing, and like kind of like giving us all those avenues to kind of like discuss and ask all those questions. Anything that I kind of missed, Sasha, team, that y'all might want to add or touch on? We go into our first examples and I hand off to Stephen.
I feel like you got it all right there, Brian.
I think so.
Y'all are saying I'm perfect. I don't believe you though.
I didn't say that.
with that said, I'll hand off to Steven for this kind of like first example on like phase one and like adjusting.
Yeah, so phase one, adjusting. Charlie's Barbecue is a local example of a business that moved quickly during these crazy times to adjust their marketing and their messaging. Here on Twitter, they talked about the impact of COVID when they shared a video from a barbecue place in Seattle talking about how restaurants in Seattle will need the help from the community in the next few steps as far as surviving as a small business during COVID. And let's see. Also, the next day they posted a thread on their own story where they talked about how they are now offering curbside pickup along with other changes to their restaurant to make sure they were being as careful as possible. So just like showing in their messaging on social that they were making changes and like being quick and responsive to the relevant topics that's going on in the world. This was just cool just to see them like be real and be authentic. They didn't go out their way and like post up any fake messages, or they just kept real and put out a small tweet storm just explaining some of the changes and some of the challenges that they were having and facing.
Yeah, and then just the only note I have is also, it's like for people that possibly don't know this example, is Charlie's pretty much never tweeted like before this. It's like they had some tweets on their profile, but they just, it's like they took to Twitter on March 12th of just like wanting to share things and just put it out there. And then like, you know, that kind of like sets up this kind of like second half of this as well.
Yeah, the response for the community was overwhelmingly positive. You see here that the Times Free Press picked up the story, and also that they shared messages from their Facebook onto their Twitter as well, just showing like the community response, showing how everybody was happy and just, you know, still rocking with them even through hard times. Let's see. Yeah, pretty much. Like they just show here like how transparent they were, and like that's great for small businesses and all businesses to do. It's just being able to humanize their brand and humanize themselves, which is being real and being transparent.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree there. And so that kind of takes us into some examples we have on phase two.
Yeah. So Old Smoky Distillery is actually a client of ours. They have 4 locations across Tennessee, 3 up in the Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area, and then 1 location in Nashville as well. And they sell their products nationally and even internationally at this point. But a large portion of their revenue comes from visitors to their distilleries in those locations through doing tastings and selling merchandise and selling product. So they were hit pretty hard, or they anticipated that they were going to be hit really hard when COVID demanded that they close. But rather than just sort of sit idly or worry about what was going to happen next, we worked with them to in kind of a plan on how they could tackle COVID, which involved first and foremost transitioning their facilities over to producing hand sanitizer that they then quickly developed to all different sorts of first responders and the school systems in their region. So that was a way in which they were able to immediately provide value back to their community, show that they were taking the threat seriously, that they were taking their employees' safety seriously, the consumer safety seriously, and that they were there to show up for the community. In addition to doing that kind of on the ground effort, we also worked with them to shift their content in a really big way. We had to pivot pretty hard. They had an entire marketing campaign plan to kind of lead them through spring into summer and fall, and everything hit the brakes really, really hard when we realized that, you know, we can't show photos of people enjoying their product together anymore, and we can't get to this location or that location to do a full-scale production. So a lot of things had to be rethought on a really fast pace, and ultimately we worked with them to transition their ongoing live concert series, Jars and Jams, from something that happened at their locations up in East Tennessee to something that was going to be streamed online. So the people who, were missing out on actually coming to the locations and listening in and experiencing the joy of live music got to continue doing that from home. And beyond that, it actually made that event more accessible to a wider number of people, because those who couldn't initially travel to that area to see it in person got to experience it online. So that was a great way for them to bolster their community. In addition to that, in order to support bartenders and wait staff or service staff across the United States that were going through hard times because of closures, we worked with them to develop this content series called Bartender Takeover, where each time they partner with a different bartender from a location, a restaurant location somewhere in the United States. That bartender will teach the audience how to make a different cocktail of their own devising with Old Smoky products. And then there will be a link to donate, and any of the funds donated go towards supporting the bartenders and wait staff. They have a relief fund in their kind of overarching organization. Old Smoky, in addition to kind of helping solicit donations from the community, matched the donation. So they kind of took a number of different approaches to ensuring that they were supporting their local community and also supporting their global community of people who were relevant to their business and what they were doing. So they took a pretty targeted approach and ended up bringing a lot of people in.
Cool. I also noticed that we had someone else join. So welcome, and just like to let you know, like, we are totally down for this to be a like collaborative kind of like session. So if you've got any thoughts or questions or anything, feel free to hop off mute and kind of chime in and ask us in like real time if you want.
Hey Jeremy, how are you?
Hi guys, sorry. I was supposed to be here earlier, but I had some technical difficulties today. I apologize.
Oh, you're good. This is Jeremy, who Victoria mentioned earlier. I know you, and I think Kate might know you, but I think Beemore, Brian, and Stephen are new faces for you. So, hey, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you guys.
Hello.
Love it. Cool. All right, so I'll go into this kind of phase 3.
So as we move into this next recover phase, as the city began to reopen, and I'm sure other cities around the country, people were eager to leave their homes and return to some sense of normalcy, whatever that means for them. And of course, like, one of the things that's been top of mind for a lot of people throughout this whole process is, like, what's it going to be like when these places are able to reopen? How are they going to handle it? And that was a big concern for a lot of people. So one of the first restaurants in our Chattanooga specifically that we noticed was doing a very good job of handling this was Feedco. So they were one of the first restaurants to reopen in this kind of first wave of reopening. And we really commend them for doing an incredible job of communicating their updated safety precautions, their updated policies, any updates and changes they made to their business. And they did all of this with the safety and health of the patrons in mind. Because obviously if, they don't take these precautions and do that, then they won't have a restaurant to feed people with. So just to kind of go over what they did, they posted, I guess, a few days, maybe the week before they were planning to reopen, they posted this very detailed, very heartfelt message from the owners, kind of outlining this is when we're going to reopen, and we know that kind of going out is still a concern for a lot of people, and we totally understand that, and that's why we're taking all these precautions to make your next experience with us as comfortable, healthy, and safe as possible. So they used this whole Instagram post to outline exactly what they were doing. And then again, a couple of days before they opened, they posted this picture of their staff wearing gloves and masks as a way to show customers and followers, like, hey, yes, we're doing this, because that visibility for customers is very important for them to see that the owners and the staff are living up to their words, that they are taking these precautions. And then lastly, the day they opened, they post this picture of a seemingly empty dining room with one table with people in it, which It looks very different from what we're used to seeing, but it still goes to show like they took the precautions, they did what they said they were going to do, and to my knowledge, they're still doing what they said they would do. So this just goes to show that like being transparent and communicating with your audience and giving them like a plan of how you plan to go forward, it really kind of eases the minds of people so that they feel more comfortable maybe stepping back out, and whether they dine in at a restaurant or they go to a restaurant and get food to go. That importance of being transparent and outlining your process is very important to this recovery phase.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Kate. So then for our like next example, I kind of wanted to break down what I saw happening with High Point. As like a member of High Point, I've been getting emails and things from them for months now on all of this. But it's been like really, it's like interesting to see how they have, kind of gone through all three phases. And since they're kind of like one of the, brands I'm closest to, that's kind of like how I kind of like saw that journey. So I kind of wanted to, it's like I want to share that journey that they like took all their like users like through in these past couple of months. And it all started with this kind of like first post. I want to say it was like March 13th. And they were like, and this was like when all like the initial closures were kind of happening, but still like before all like the official like city ordinances. And they were just communicating on how like, hey, it's like we're staying open right now, and we're doing these things to keep everyone safe. And then 2 days later, and it's like this middle post, they put out another post, but then they went into more detail as to how they were doing things to keep people safe and to make sure things are clean. And seeing as how like the first post from like the 13th and then like to the 15th, it went from like a few little lines to it's like what you can't see on that middle post, that it's actually like this very, very long paragraph. It's like that's also, it's just like them communicating like, wow, it's like we're taking this even more serious since we are like, deciding to stay open, and like it's like here's what we're doing. But then ultimately, just 2 days later, so we're talking literally a total of like 96 hours from that first post, they're announcing that they're closed and like why they're doing it, how they're going to be shutting down for at least a few weeks, and then going from there. But it's just like it's a great example of this like phase one and going through that like adjustment of it's like obviously on your end as a business, behind the scenes you're going to be doing lots of things and thinking about lots of things of how you're moving forward and like all the things that you're considering. But just like, it's like kind of like pulling back that curtain and sharing with people is just like the best thing to do, because it's like they're asking, or they're asking themselves all those questions of like, what's my community doing? How are these places responding? What's going on? And like, everyone's looking just for information, people to trust, and just like anybody that's kind of sharing and trying to help be that like arbiter of information, like is super helpful. And then as they moved into phase two, and again, it's like just like Old Smoky, they're really trying to figure out like what are they going to do? It's like their whole thing is taking people out and going outside and doing different like climbing experiences, or training people in their facilities, or just being open to the public and their members. But they can't post and talk about that stuff anymore. And so what they did was they actually kind of like launched a new content series. And they, connected like with a local, like very popular and talented climber, and had her do a Instagram like takeover, where for like a few days in a row, she was posting and talking about different things. And I even went back a couple of years just to kind of confirm, but it's like they had never done a takeover like this on their pages. And this got like more likes and comments than like the vast majority of all their posts. So it's like one, it's a great example of how when they needed to change how they're talking and communicating with people, just based on the fact that like things were closed, people can't come in, and they like did this thing. It's also signaling that their community would like to see more of this kind of stuff and would like to be more connected to like the climbers in the area and what they're doing, how they're feeling, what are they interested in. And it's definitely something that they should like, I hope that they're going to be kind of like that they saw that same signal, and that they're going to kind of keep this kind of like content series going like long term, even as we kind of like are back to opening and everything. And then as they were kind of going into that phase 3 of like recovery, they again took back to social media, and like their like email list start like outlining all the different things that they were doing for safety. And they kind of kicked this off with like this like initial post on like May 11th, which was about, I think, 6 days before they opened. And they were really like, it's like listening and like responding to the community, where they didn't have a ton of information out at first. It was first just like, hey, we're opening and we're going to be safe. But then there was tons of comments being like, hey, it's like, what are you doing? Are you going to do this? I've heard some businesses are doing this. And then over those next few days leading up to that reopening on the 17th, they were putting out more pieces of content, like this one with like this like scrolling like GIF that I made of like showing them, you know, it's like taking temperatures and wearing masks, and like putting in some like extra kind of like hand sanitizer stations, but then also just like listing out all the different things that they're doing. And it was just like it was just like a really good job of like thinking about like how they're going forward, but again, still like responding and like reacting to the community, and then doing it. It's like what they want and need. And I was even like one of those people that reached out, because like the first post that they had, it had been a couple of days and there was no further information of like what they were doing, how they were being safe. And I was just like, hey, like, are you all working on that or anything? And it's kind of like privately like DM'd them, and they actually, it's like responded like, yep, it's like we've got post plans, you know, and like excited to kind of share all the things that we're doing, like more to come, which was just like really cool that they were even like proactively thinking about it, like, and recognizing that just like one little post saying that they're opening, yes, people want to go climb and they're super excited about it, but like really kind of putting themselves in that mindset of their consumer and what they like want and need, and then trying to meet that through all of their different communications, to give everyone, you know, it's like whatever they want to then like make a decision whether they're going to come in or like delay coming in. And so that's kind of like the wrap on this first, you know, section. And I kind of like talked to a little bit at the beginning, is that like what's like, to me, it's like what's like really cool about, you know, this, you know, all these examples from businesses, whether like strictly these or even just outside in the rest of the US, of like no one has faced this before. Like it's like, you know, there are not, yes, it's like your global biggest companies in the world probably have like PR and like, you know, it's like plans around pandemics, but no one else has this information. It's like I'm in like this big marketing, you know, community on like Twitter, and everybody's like, I don't know what to do with this stuff. But it's, you know, it's like, as usual, just like being kind to people and like being empathetic, and like leading with that in all of your communications is like actually all that anybody needed. And everybody was almost kind of like overthinking, like it's like what they needed to do during this time, which is, I think it's a very like encouraging thing, because I think that there's like a lot of businesses that have come out of this and they're kind of now in this like recovery phase 3 time, and they're like seeing, oh, it's like we can do this. It's like we do have the skills to do this on our own. It's like we don't have to let's like go hire some, you know, it's like you know, local agency to help like my small little business communicate with people, and then it really is just kind of like that simple.
And even on a large scale, we continue to see some really innovative content, innovative marketing from brands. Like Arby's recycled a commercial that they went live with a year ago, because obviously they didn't have, you know, the opportunity to do additional production for their new campaign. So they brought back this chicken salad sandwich that they debuted, I think, last year, along with another sandwich. The spot featured, it was just literally these 2 sandwiches sitting on a, you know, wooden block, beautifully styled. It slowly zoomed into them, and you could see the chicken salad sandwich, and then in the background there was this other sandwich that they kind of had blurred out and pixelated, and the voiceover was something to the effect of, because of COVID, we obviously couldn't go shoot any production, so we're using last year's commercial. Don't mind the other sandwich, just focus on the chicken salad sandwich. It was just so completely transparent and so real, that it was exciting to see as a marketer, because we, you know, even when brands don't have the means to go and do something completely new and completely different, to adapt and change with the times, there's a lot of value that we can place on being transparent and making do with what we have, and people will appreciate it and find humor in it. We can't forget the fact that this is a shared traumatic human experience, and if we can find a way to kind of enjoy the good pieces of it and not try to make every single move we make perfect, we're all going to be better off for it.
Yep, totally agree on that, Jess. Thanks. That's like any thoughts from anybody else on the call? Incubator or not? Victoria, you got anything up in your mind over there?
I've got a question, guys.
Yeah.
Have you seen any good examples of companies handling it well when, the worst happens and they have a confirmed case on their premises somewhere? Because I know we've seen a lot of media outlets like to publish that when that happens. So I was just wondering if you had seen any examples of people handling that particularly well.
I saw one recently. This wasn't a local to Chattanooga business, but it was a coffee shop I follow out of Huntsville, I believe, that they posted that they did have a confirmed case of someone in their roastery or something, and they said, we're closing immediately for 2 weeks. We're going to clean and sanitize the entire space from top to bottom, and we will follow up with our plans to reopen after that. So they weren't like super wishy-washy or anything. They were just like, this happened. We hate that it happened, but here's what we're doing to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy and taken care of, and that we can serve you healthy and safely again as soon as we can. But they obviously weren't trying to like rush anything, but they were trying to say like, we are doing everything we can to remedy this the best we can. So again, I think it's just the transparency that's most important.
Yep. Yeah, and I saw a similar thing from like a brand where like it wasn't a it was a like actually no sorry, it was Old Smoky, where like one of their like distillery workers was like, was positive, and even though it's like everything was like closed, it's like there were still people just asking of like, hey, like we just did the pickup thing or whatever. And so like we were just being like very open with like people like commenting and just being like, yep, it's like this happened. It's like, it's like they they're now being quarantined, and we're doing like, it's like we're kind of like shutting production down and doing like a deep clean of everything, and we'll be like resuming in a couple of days. But again, it's just like that same note of just like be transparent and be honest. It's like there's no reason to try to like cut any corners, and with stuff like that.
Well, and there's no reason to not be transparent because people are going to find out anyway. So might as well put it out and be the first to deliver rather than have someone else have to be the messenger and you have to follow up and clear things up. So I appreciated that they seem to have handled it from the get-go.
And the fortunate thing is, especially in our local area, there have been a far greater number of businesses who have been willing to correct their mistake and admit when they messed up or didn't take an appropriate precaution, move on from it, than those who didn't, or tried to hide it, or tried to deceive people, or acted in a really self-serving way. A good example of a business that didn't handle it well is the Dose Bros in Hickson on 153. They they didn't take appropriate safety precautions. They had tons of people. They were doing takeout only. They closed their dining room to people coming in, but they still were doing assembly line style food. They had a line of people out the door doing pickup. People weren't maintaining social distance. The workers weren't wearing gloves or masks. And, at one point they just got shut down completely. They didn't choose to shut down. They were temporarily shut down. And I don't know about a lot of other people, but that's something that put a really bad taste in my mouth, because it makes it really clear that they don't value the health and safety of people who work for them or the people in their community. So while I agree with Kate, like, you have to be transparent, because if you don't admit to mistakes that had been made or admit that something slipped through the cracks, someone is going to find out. And it's a lot better if you can get ahead of it somehow and be proactive about it instead of being reactive when things do eventually fall down around you.
Yeah, and that even kind of like reminds me of some conversations that we had with some different groups of how do you kind of balance if your audience is kind of like in the audience that is maybe taking this like less seriously. It's like how do you kind of like approach this, and like it's still kind of like our like recommendation that you've got to be thinking about everybody as a whole. Of it's like some people in your audience who maybe have been kind of like expressing that they think that these things are overkill or not necessary. It's like that's like a whole another conversation of like their it's like thoughts and everything and discussion. But what's more important is like the opportunity cost of not communicating the right things to the people that are worried. And so just like kind of taking it through that kind of like lens of if there are people that like think that it's not as serious and that some of these like precautions are a little bit overkill, you're not going to like drive them away from your business by being transparent of like all these things that you're doing that are promoting like health and safety. It's like they're probably going to gripe and complain a little bit just because they're like expressing their thoughts, but it's the people on this other side that are worried and that do want to see that brands are doing that. So it's like if you're not reaching out and sharing that message with them, they're probably not going to be considering your business for takeout or whatever it is at this time, because they're like looking for those brands and companies that are making them feel safe with like the decisions that they're deciding to make. Any other final thoughts, team? We jump on to part 2.
Let's keep going.
Alrighty. Part 2. Black Lives Matter. So with this, this talk was initially set up to just be around like COVID and everything. We were going to blow it out a little bit more, but as everything has been gaining more attention and momentum with the Black Lives Matter movement, in the past 2 weeks than it has in the, kind of like 6 years prior, we really felt that this was something that we would want to kind of like bring into this talk and to bring into this conversation because there are a lot of people that are kind of like activating around a social cause possibly for the first time, and they're like unsure of what to do or how to approach it. And it is like a sensitive, topic for people, and we kind of wanted to share our POV of like what we've seen, like what we've been consulting clients through these past couple of weeks as they've been kind of trying to figure out how they can get involved in the now, but then also kind of set themselves up for long-term activations. And so it's kind of like with that, it's like the same thing with kind of like part 1. It's not a kind of like one size fits all. And then it's like this is kind of like a framework that we've been seeing that we think does like a good job of kind of breaking down different things and how you can respond and react and begin to like connect again like with your like local community, because that's like where you can have like that biggest impact. And so it's not just like helping out nationally, but it's like thinking about it's like what is like the role of like your brand or your company playing in your community and how you can be activating around that.
So the first part of this kind of 4-step process that we're talking about, step 1 is be curious. So this is really an opportunity to listen and observe, kind of listen to what's around you, what other people are talking about, what other businesses are doing or not doing, and learn from it and use that as an opportunity to educate yourself on the issue at hand. And once you give yourself the time and space to do that, a clear path of action will very likely follow. And then when you do act, make sure your actions have meaning behind them. Like put some oomph behind it. Don't just, post something that you're not going to follow through with. So like actions do speak louder than words. A local example, this Lil Oso kind of food concept, they didn't post about anything for a couple of days. And instead they were taking that time to listen and observe and learn and educate themselves on what was happening and what was going to be the best way for them to respond and make a positive impact. And when they did eventually join the conversation, they really did let their actions speak louder than their words. So, for example, they used revenue to supply protesters and organizers with snacks and cold drinks. And they really, from what I understand, have been giving their staff and their patrons just like a lot of freedom to go out and express themselves and to participate and to do what they what they think is right to really make an impact on this movement. So I think I just saw yesterday or early this morning that they're actually closing for a week as a stand in solidarity to give their staff and owners, again, another opportunity to learn, listen, observe, and educate themselves, and then find even more ways that they can make a positive impact in their community.
Cool. And then kind of as a brief detour in this part one, kind of want to talk about like Blackout Tuesday and like what kind of was going on like, a week ago. And I'm sure like, as everyone noticed, the last Tuesday, early in the morning, this hashtag Blackout Tuesday was like going viral and everybody's posting these, black squares, all their Instagram feeds. Literally by, 11 a.m. Eastern time, is like that was like the earliest article that I saw where someone was talking about like, hey, like your black squares not really working. It's not doing anything. And it was like opening up all these like really good, conversations around like, what are you doing in this moment? It's like, are you just, kind of like trying to jump on this trend and make it seem like you're like super woke and you're with the times? Or are you actually someone who's helping and doing things? And that's kind of like where there's this kind of like some push and pull between different people, just like in like, it's in the news, but then also in like the marketing world of lots of good conversations going around of like, yes, this is kind of, or the fact that people were using like the Black Lives Matter hashtag with the Blackout Tuesday, it was like hiding all the actual good posts and information. But then there was other people kind of having conversations of like, yes, it's like, stop using like the Black Lives Matter hashtag, be using Blackout Tuesday. But is this kind of like a thing where it's like, could this turn into a good thing where it helps trigger people to understand that doing something like just posting like the black box and saying that you like support the cause isn't enough. And while it's like those are things that have always kind of been talked about, there wasn't something that just took over the country at like this kind of scale with millions and millions of posts and then, tons of articles coming out, kind of like calling everybody out for that thing that they did. And kind of like, asking people to take a second look at like what they posted. And it's like, yes, you posted that thing, but as like, just like as Kate mentioned, like, it's like your actions have to have meaning. It's like, were you just posting that thing because you didn't want to feel left out? Or because you actually want to be committed to like supporting a cause? And so that was actually something that we were having a lot of conversations with clients about on Tuesday. So like, it's like one of my clients, it's like they're, based in Denver, so they're on Mountain Time. So with the, it's like the news cycle is still a little bit, a little bit different of like kind of waking up and kind of like seeing things. And he calls me and he's like, I'm seeing this, everybody posting to this hashtag, but then I'm also seeing lots of pushback from people of saying that it's like not good enough. And he's just like, it's such a good point. It's like, it's not good enough. It's like, we should not settle for just posting the thing because people are posting the thing. And he was just like, but he's like, I don't know what to do. He's, it's like he was mentioning that, and kind of like from his, own words, he was just like, I know all the, kind of like queer organizations in Denver, but I don't know all of like the great Black organizations that I could be helping. And he's like, I like want, and, you know, and it was like this tough thing of where it's like, you know, I can like, it's like, and we spoke for over 30 minutes about kind of like this, and like on Tuesday and going forward of, he's like, I should have been doing more of these things. I feel bad about it. And it's like, we were supporting all these pride groups because that's like what we're closer to, but like we weren't supporting these. So it's like, how do we kind of start getting closer to them and start helping them? And it was like a great example of just like that, like listening and learning aspect of like, here we are just kind of like discussing like what's going on, like what's happening, and like what are like the ways to kind of like activate and go forward. And so it's like what he did was he then was like reaching out to his friends and people that he knew to kind of like find some of those like big organizations in Denver. And so it's like, you know, he ended up posting his Black Square Tuesday afternoon, but he even like, instead of just having like the hashtag with it, he had like a note talking about like how like they're going to start doing more things. And then at the same time, he even went to his Instagram stories, and he posted and was like linking out to like a handful of different organizations in the community, whether it was like their Instagram page or they had a website, going to their website, and kind of just like showing that it's like, yes, it's like not just like, are we supporting you, but like we're also hearing you of, we're not just posting the Black Square, but like we want to do a better job of being more involved and supportive of everything going forward. This takes us to number 2.
Yeah, the next step is being real. I mean, brands, I feel like everybody has to be human. You don't necessarily have to go out your way to try to fit in with everybody else or everybody else standard of what helping looks like. Unknown Collar is a good local example. Me personally, before seeing this example and seeing them post this and actually seeing them out there at the protest, I was kind of like shocked to see them because I thought they weren't like they weren't like super inclusive or super supportive of diversity. But actually, after seeing them take a real stance like this, and it's like when I seen this, like they wasn't out there in front of the cameras or nothing like that. Like it was real genuine, and like you could just tell the sincerity behind the actions that they were doing. I mean, like I said, like you don't have to go out there and be on the front lines of the protests, like screaming at the police or anything. But I mean, if you feel inclined to help, just help any way you can. And being real is a great way to help. Because I mean, disingenuous help can also be negative to the situation and negative to your brand. So yeah, basically find contributions that match you and your brand, and just be real.
Yeah, and that was kind of like, it's like as we were pulling this together and kind of like working on it as a team the past couple of days, that it's like that like really kind of like is struck. It's like when Steven made that comment, because it's like obviously this group of people from Unknown Caller, they are supportive of like of all these different like, you know, initiatives and like, you know, pushing like more like diversity and everything, but because they had not been making it kind of like it's like a part of who they are, it's like Steven didn't know. So Steven like wasn't interested in like, you know, going and checking them out or whatever. And how then it's like when he, you know, saw him do this, it's like, oh, it's like you're actually just, it's like you're just being who you are. But since you had never spoken about it, like nobody knew, which can then like in turn, you know, sometimes like lead to like negative things of people thinking that like your silence is you like not being in support of different things.
Yes, in 2020, silence equals like you being complicit with everything that goes on. So being able to speak out, it gives you an opportunity to like shape the perception of you and your brand. And I mean, even if you hadn't been super supportive, it gives you a chance to just like pivot and try to be on the right side of history as time goes forward.
All right, number 3.
Yep. Be transparent. This has been probably the most difficult thing for many businesses to accomplish during this time, because being transparent really forces you to take a look at, you know, the discriminatory tendencies and kind of like subtle, you know, low-key things that you wouldn't think twice about on a normal day. But that's kind of the beauty of this movement, is that it's forced everyone to take a really good hard look in the mirror and realize that even if their intentions are good, there's always a way that we can do better, and there's always a way that we can change. Like Stephen and I were talking about this yesterday with the rest of our team, and like it feels like everything has changed so suddenly because the entire community has just been complacent for so long. So if you're asking yourself, like, why is it now? Why is this happening? It's because there's finally an opportunity for people to, or people are being forced to like really look at themselves critically, and think about why the way they've been doing things for so long aren't the way things should be done, or aren't the way things will be done in the future. But all of that said, we've seen a lot of really good transparency from a number of businesses out there. We're coming forward to release statistics on the ethnic makeup of their leadership teams, and ways they're, you know, beginning to make changes, or ways they have always been, you know, supporting Black-owned or people of color-owned businesses and employees. But most of all, what the best examples have been doing are providing a safe space, a non-combative space, an open and humble space for people to ask questions and to even make accusations, and they're answering them in a generous and open-minded way. This came to light recently for us in a pretty real way, in that our own CEO, our holding company VaynerX, and our kind of sister company VaynerMedia were accused of being in bed with some not so great people. And our CEO, Gary Vaynerchuk, responded to every tweet, every single email, every single DM, every comment he received when he was questioned about that relationship. And specifically, this refers to Stephen Ross, who is a 30% investor in VaynerMedia. He is a quiet stakeholder. He hasn't received any dividends from his investment, and he has no say in how the business is run. But VaynerMedia popped up on a list of companies with stakeholders or investors or relationships to people who had contributed to Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And we received a lot of fire on a global level for that, but also even locally, we were called out by a few people wondering why we made it onto that list and what we're doing about it. And both internally, in a very, very transparent, like company-wide all hands meeting where we all got on a Zoom, or not on a Zoom, but on a YouTube Live. And Gary took questions from the entire company and was really honest and transparent about what the connection was, and how it did or did not impact the running of the business and all of the people that work here. But also, we talked a lot about this is kind of twofold. So that kind of like handles the public part of it with Stephen Ross, but also internally, what we thought was really amazing was that he took the opportunity not to tell us what he was doing or what the leadership of our company was doing to make things different or to make things better. He asked us what we wanted to see. And we had a huge number of Black people and people of color from across our company step up and ask for things that they needed and ask for things to change. And the fact that he, a white man who arguably has, faced some prejudices of his own, but definitely not on the scale of many of these people, sat and listened and agreed to make changes. So that was a really cool thing to be a part of as an employee. A number of people throughout our company, voiced that in their time at previous advertising agencies. They never in a million years could have expected the level of transparency and empathy that was given to us during that meeting. So similarly to some of the other areas we've talked about where it's just as important to consider the internal effects as the external effects, transparency is one of those areas. You want to be as transparent as you possibly can be with the public, because this is going to be one of those times when people are demanding answers from you and demanding change from you. You have to be open to workshopping and brainstorming and accepting that you may not be the person who has the best answer to the problem. Then also internally, knowing that similarly to with the COVID changes, that everyone who works for you and within your company is affected as a person and as a human, not just an employee. So I know that was pretty long-winded, but this is probably one of the most important things you can remember in all of this. Don't try to be something you're not. Make sure you're honest with people about who you are. And I think that's a really nice dovetail into the last point, which is be humble. Should you do the wrong thing, be not just open, but enthusiastic about receiving feedback and engaging in discourse with your community. We are all dealing with the extreme heaviness of all of these events, but good intentions and an open mind and the ability to explain the why of what you're doing and kind of talk people through it and not just think you have to have the end all be all answer, but you're willing to collaborate and to grow, go a long way towards creating connections and, building bridges with communities that you haven't been able to connect with in the past. If you get called out, the best thing you can do is listen, learn, and do better next time. And that's not just applicable to this situation, that's just how to do better as a human too.
Yeah, and it's very similar to, it's like the wrap up from the first section of it's, and I can kind of even, it'd be difficult to jump back up to those slides of before, but it's all about just kind of like, as like Jess was just saying, it's like with the be humble, but so much of this is just learning and being open to anything and everything and just like being and staying nimble. It's like, this was, it's like this, specific section was through like the lens of like Black Lives Matter, but I'm sure over our careers, people and businesses will have some new thing pop up. And it's like, who knows, it's like what that will be in 5, 10 years or 6 months or whatever. But it's kind of like this kind of like framework applies to like almost like anything. And we just chose like the Black Lives Matter to talk about because it's, top of mind for everyone right now and getting more attention than it kind of like ever has. And it really seems like it's about to be a big kind of like milestone and turning point. It's like for the country and like where things are going. And it's important for businesses that, are supportive of it to kind of like make sure that they are, even if they are nervous about talking about it, just like not wanting to be called out or something or to do the wrong thing. But to kind of like accept that like those things might happen, but that's just, it's acceptable and par for the course when you're working through how you're kind of activating and talking through different things that are so heavy with everyone. And what was it? The other thing I was going to say, I think it's just like there's a sense of just like doing, it's like just doing like, it's like what you feel is right. And if you are right, it's like good things will happen. If you're like familiar with the NFL and everything that they've had going on politically with Black Lives Matter since August of 2016, they're getting called out kind of like even more so now. And they've made some initial pushes in like a better direction. But it actually all started, and this came out a few days ago, it all started from a rogue employee on their social media team where he was like, working for the NFL and he was not happy with like their response and everything. So he personally DM'd different athletes across the league. It's like he didn't know any of them personally. They didn't know him. It was a shot in the dark if they'd even respond. And they saw his messages and they responded. And they, it's like he wrote a script and then they all kind of like recorded videos. They sent it to him and then he compiled it into one kind of like minute-long video and then sent it back out to all those athletes. And all those athletes posted that to their page. And like what he did was technically kind of like wrong from the eyes of the NFL. He was doing something that's like he thought was right, and he gets pulled into this thing with leadership at the NFL, and he still works there, and he's not fired or anything, and they've been making changes. And it really kind of goes to show, like, no matter like who your business is or whatever, like we all have some role that we can play, like when these kind of big like social moments are going on, and it's just kind of like trying to figure out, it's like, what's the role that you can play based on it's like your skill set. It's like thinking about how like Loso, it's like they make food. So like how are they participating? They're going out and like donating food. And then it's like from us at like VaynerMedia and like Sasha, it's like we already do like, pro bono work throughout the year, but we're now it's like looking into different organizations that are more, it's like more closely aligned to like Black Lives Matter movement, and even just like promoting more like diversity and inclusion, so we can kind of like help, some of those like people of color, like businesses, and like, provide them with our like services for free. And it's like, and the reason we're doing that is because that's, as like a marketing agency, that's where we can, over index and help. And it's just, finding that way to go activating your community based on, it's like what your skill set is.
That's the one last thing that I want to say before we just open to any Q&A, if there is any, is that across both the COVID pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think something that may not click for everyone is that these aren't just events that we need to weather and move past. There have been a number of different things in the past where we go through them and things are difficult for a while, and then eventually things get back to normal. But what both of these events teach us in different ways is that what we have considered and experienced as normal for a really long time isn't working. In the case of the COVID pandemic, it says a lot to how we interact with one another and what safety precautions we take on a regular basis, and how our food is prepared and how people interact with one another every day. And the fact that, we needed to quarantine to stop the spread of disease tells us that the way things are happening are working for long term. And with the Black Lives Matter movement, we see the editors-in-chief of major publications and heads of companies and members of boards on, big organizations that are all stepping down to make room for Black people and for other people of color to fill those spaces and to take a seat with everyone else. Things are going to look irrevocably different in the coming years. Things already look so different. And I guess maybe this is getting a little bit personal, but my hope, and I know a lot of people hope this, is that the world isn't going to just go back to normal. It's not going to go back to the way things were. So I think while we kind of position these things as evergreen strategies for keeping up with the times and changing and flexing, I think the most important takeaway you can have is to adapt and to not be afraid to change the way you do things, because inevitably change is going to be for the better when we all work together to figure out what that right change is. So even though things may eventually feel better once the change has taken place, and it won't feel as abrupt and violent and painful all the time. This isn't just a change for now and go back to normal situation. This is a change and sustain situation as much as it can be. So I know that was a little tangential, but just something to consider as you start thinking about like how you not just get through what's happening now, but plan for the future. Is that I think to go into the coming months and years with any other expectation than that things are going to be completely different from the way they used to be would be a mistake.
Well said.
Thank you.
It's a great transition to sitting on a slide like this. So it's like listeners at home watching this in the future. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any thoughts, questions, or anything. Be happy to answer any of that for you all, and then for anybody on the call, if you've got anything you want to chime in with, be happy to discuss that too.
No questions on my end right now, but just wanted to say thank you all for sharing all this. It's really, it was very thorough, and I love the way y'all lined it out.
Cool. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's and we also recognize that it's we were having talks about this, these past few days this is just kind of it's one kind of team's POV on all this. Doesn't mean that we're totally right. That's where it's kind of these kind of things are always just ongoing conversations of how to best accommodate, how to best move forward with things like this. All right, Jackie, I see you over there lurking too. You snuck in here. You got any thoughts, questions?
Great, and I'm just really glad that I could listen in. Appreciate you guys putting this together.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
It occurred to me that we probably could have promoted this better internally, just to kind of start a conversation amongst our coworkers too. But once, I know this is being recorded, so once we have access to it, we'll go ahead and share it with the team, and we'll share the deck out. And Victoria, Jeremy, Antigone, if the deck is something that you guys want access to as well, we can PDF it and send it through.
Sure. I also want to thank you guys and apologize again for not being here at the beginning. Of course, that's when the one time my computer would crash. I do want to thank Jess, Brian, Stephen, and Kate all for being here and being so transparent. And thank everybody for showing up for another one of our incubator experience talks. As Jess said, this will be recorded. So if someone wasn't able to attend live, we'll have this up later for folks to watch. It's a really important talk, and I think something that a lot of people, frankly, need to see right now. We will have another experience talks on June 24th. The Beauty and the Pivot. If you want to find out more information about that, you can go to our Facebook page. If you want to find out more about the Sasha Group, where do they go, guys?
We go to our newly designed website, thesashagroup.com. You can get in touch with us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook as the Sasha Group.
Okay, excellent. One last chance for any questions before we break up here. All right. In that case, thanks everybody again for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.